The man on the bench. The sun had just started to dip low over the city skyline, painting the Hollywood hills in soft amber and casting long shadows across the studio lot. Keanu Reeves stepped away from the soundstage, exhausted but satisfied. They had wrapped another intense scene for the day and the crew was starting to pack up. The director had shouted his final cut, and people were laughing, checking their phones or heading for catering. But Keanu wasn't like most of them. He didn't like being the center of attention when the cameras weren't rolling. Instead of joining the group, he wandered off toward the quieter side of the lot, near a small park area that had been set up for studio staff to relax. That's when he saw him. A man sat alone on a weathered bench under a jacaranda tree, the petals falling, like purple snow around him. He was wearing a uniform, not a film costume. This was real. Navy blues. Neat, pressed lines, a small badge on the chest. His posture was rigid, military almost, but his face told a different story. The man had both hands covering his eyes. His shoulders trembled. He was crying, not loud, but the kind of silent crying that shook a person from the inside out. Keanu froze. He had seen pain before, both on screen and off. He had lost people. He had felt grief. And something about the way this man tried to stay strong, while breaking apart, struck him in the chest. Most would have walked by, too awkward, too private. But Keanu didn't walk away. He approached quietly, respectfully, and stood a few feet away. "Hey," Keanu said gently, his voice low and calm. "I can walk away if you want, but if you need someone to just sit here, I can do that." The man didn't speak at first. He wiped his face quickly, clearly embarrassed. Then he glanced up. His eyes widened just a little. "You're Keanu Reeves?" Keanu smiled softly and nodded. "Yeah. But right now, I'm just a guy sitting on a bench too." The man hesitated, then gave a small, shaky laugh. "You sure know how to show up at the weirdest times." "I've heard that before," Keanu replied, easing down onto the other end of the bench. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, though. It was peaceful. Eventually, the man let out a long sigh. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lose it, just everything caught up with me today." Keanu turned slightly to face him, giving him space but also presence. Sometimes it takes the quiet moments for the loudest feelings to hit. The man nodded slowly. "I'm Staff Sergeant Darren McAllister. 20 years in the Army. Retired last month. Got a job as a consultant here on set. They wanted someone who could advise on military accuracy." "Makes sense," Keanu said. "They're lucky to have someone with your experience." "Maybe," Darren replied, his voice thick. "Today's scene it was about a soldier returning home and no one recognizing him anymore. Not even his family. They just walked by. And I know it's just a script, but man, it felt too real." Keanu's expression softened. "Because it's not just a script for you." Darren swallowed hard and looked at the ground. "I came home 3 weeks ago, after everything, years away. I thought maybe things would feel normal. But my wife, she left during my last deployment. My daughter's almost a stranger now. She's 16, barely answers my calls. I have medals in a box, but the house feels empty. And now I'm here, teaching actors how to salute." Keanu didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something unexpected, a small photo. He handed it to Darren. Darren looked at it. A black and white picture, an old one. A young man in military gear, holding a letter in one hand and a cigarette in the other. The edges were worn. "That's my dad," Keanu said. "He served too. Different war, different time, but same feeling when he came back. He used to say, 'The hardest part isn't the fighting, it's the forgetting. Not you forgetting, but the world forgetting you.'" Darren's eyes glistened again. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was broken when he came back," Keanu said honestly. "But he taught me one thing. He said even if the world forgets, you still remember who you are. Your strength doesn't disappear just because no one claps for it." Darren nodded slowly. "That means more than you know." Keanu leaned back, looking up at the darkening sky. I think sometimes the best thing we can do is remind each other that we still matter. Not as characters, not as headlines, but as people. And you matter, Staff Sergeant. Darren's lip trembled. Thank you. I just didn't expect to hear that today. Especially not from you. Keanu chuckled gently. Life's full of strange scripts. Sometimes we're handed a scene we didn't rehearse for, but maybe that's where the real story begins. Darren looked at him, really looked, and nodded. Yeah, maybe it is. Just then a young intern came jogging toward the bench, clearly nervous. Mr. Reeves, they're waiting for you at the lot. Next setup is ready. Keanu stood up, brushing off his jacket. He looked back at Darren. You want to come with me? I think you've got a few more lessons the crew could use. Darren blinked. Me? Now. You've been teaching actors to salute, Keanu said. But maybe today, you teach them what it really means to stand tall. Darren stood up slowly. He wasn't trembling now. He straightened his shoulders, wiped the last of the tears from his face, and gave a quiet but proud nod. Let's go. And as they walked side by side, the quiet man in uniform no longer looked like someone lost in the shadows. He looked like someone stepping into a new light, a place where his story still mattered. The salute behind the lens, the soundstage buzzed with activity. Crew members adjusted lights, ran cables, and tested microphones. The clatter of props echoed through the air as everyone prepared for the next scene. But when Keanu walked in with Darren beside him, the energy shifted. No one said it out loud, but they noticed the way Keanu moved, slower, more intentional, and how the man in uniform beside him didn't just follow, he walked with purpose. We'll be shooting the desert checkpoint scene next, the assistant director said, flipping through her clipboard. We need military precision. Our actors still aren't getting the salutes right. Keanu glanced at Darren. I think we've got the right man for the job. Darren hesitated for just a second, but when he looked around and saw the actors waiting in costume, unsure of their roles, something in him clicked. He stepped forward. Attention! Darren called out, his voice clear and sharp. The actors jolted, instinctively straightening up. Even the extras paused mid-conversation. You're not just raising your hand to your forehead, Darren continued, walking slowly between them. A salute isn't about the arm. It's about respect. It's about knowing that the person you're facing has earned it, not demanded it. You salute because they've stood where you've stood, or because you want to show that you understand what they carry. He stopped in front of a young actor who'd been struggling all week with his military posture. Son, what do you think? A salute says? The actor swallowed hard. It says, I acknowledge you. Close, Darren said. It says, I see you. The word sank in deeper than anyone expected. The room fell silent. Even the camera crew stopped fiddling with their lenses. Keanu stepped beside him. Do it again, he said to the actor, nodding. The young man raised his hand slowly, this time with intention, not performance. Darren returned the salute, crisp and clean. Better, Darren said softly. Now you're not pretending. Now you're honoring. A quiet round of claps came from the crew, not loud, not forced, just genuine. After rehearsal, Keanu and Darren sat at a fold-out table with 2 mugs of lukewarm coffee. The sun had disappeared behind the buildings, and the golden stage lights gave everything a surreal glow. You were born to teach, Keanu said with a small smile. I was born to serve, Darren answered. But maybe teaching is another way to do that. Both take strength, Keanu said, and both can heal. Darren looked down at his mug. I don't know about healing, not yet. Keanu tilted his head. You're further along than you think. There was a long pause before Darren spoke again. You ever lose someone close and not get to say goodbye? Keanu nodded slowly. Yeah, my best friend, River. We were like brothers. Then, gone. No warning. Just silence. And that silence, it echoed for years. How did you live with it? Darren asked. I didn't at first, Keanu said. I worked. I kept moving. Like if I stood still too long, I'd fall apart. But eventually, I realized something. Pain doesn't shrink, but your world can grow around it. Darren's eyes welled up and his voice cracked. My friend died overseas. We were in the same convoy. He wanted to switch seats with me that day, just so I could nap. I said no. Minutes later, an IED hit our lead truck. He was inside. Keanu didn't speak. He just reached out, placed a steady hand on Darren's shoulder, and let the silence hold space for the truth. I think about him every day, Darren whispered, and I wonder if it should have been me. Keanu looked at him gently. It wasn't, and that's not an accident. Maybe there's something he wanted you to do, something only you can carry forward. A tear rolled down Darren's cheek, but he didn't wipe it away this time. He wanted to be a teacher, like high school history or something. He said kids didn't know half of what people sacrificed for freedom. Keanu smiled. Then maybe that's your mission now. Maybe you're not done writing your part of the story. Before Darren could answer, a quiet voice interrupted them. It was the young actor from earlier. Excuse me, Staff Sergeant. I just wanted to say thank you for what you said. I didn't understand before, but now I do. Darren looked surprised. You're welcome. And you don't have to call me that, just Darren is fine. No, sir, the actor said respectfully. With all due respect, you've earned it. As the actor walked away, Darren sat in stunned silence, his eyes glassy. Not with pain this time, but something else. A quiet, humble pride. Keanu leaned back, watching the shadows grow longer across the lot. Sometimes all it takes is one person saying thank you to start changing everything. Darren didn't reply. He just nodded, more to himself than anyone else. The next morning, Darren showed up earlier than anyone else on set. The director found him setting up a whiteboard, drawing diagrams for the cast about formations and roles. His voice was steady, his tone clear. People started calling him Coach, a name that stuck. Every day more actors came to ask questions, to learn. Some even stayed after hours, just to talk. But Darren wasn't just teaching military tactics anymore. He was teaching what it meant to live after war, to rebuild identity, to find purpose again, and somehow, without planning it, he became part of the heart of the production. One evening, as the sun was dipping low again, Keanu came to visit him. He found Darren standing alone, looking up at a prop flag fluttering in the wind. You okay? Keanu asked. Better than yesterday, Darren said quietly. Keanu followed his gaze. That flag up there, it means something different to you. Yeah, Darren said. It always has. But now, I think it also means something new. That is that home isn't a place. It's not even people, it's a purpose. And maybe I'm starting to find mine again. Keanu didn't respond with words. He just nodded, then gave a small, respectful salute. Darren returned it without hesitation. As the sky darkened and the lights of the city blinked on in the distance, two men stood in quiet understanding, one who acted in war films, the other who lived them, and for that brief moment, both shared something deeper than scripts or salutes. They shared healing, a scene that wasn't acting. The days passed quickly on set, but something had shifted in the air. It wasn't just the script that people talked about anymore. It was Darren. The quiet man in uniform who had shown up broken now stood tall among the crew. He wasn't just a military consultant anymore. He was a symbol, a reminder that some roles couldn't be rehearsed. They had to be lived. Keanu noticed it in the smallest things. A grip who used to joke around now stood a little straighter when Darren walked by. A costume designer who rarely spoke to actors suddenly wanted to know more about the medals pinned to Darren's jacket. And that young actor, the one who once struggled to even fake a salute, now asked Darren to read his lines with him, after hours. One evening, during a rehearsal for a heavy combat scene, the director paused the take and looked frustrated. Cut! No, it's not landing. It's too stiff. We need emotion. This soldier just lost his best friend. It's not about yelling, it's about what you don't say. Keanu glanced at the actor. He could tell the kid was trying, but there was something missing. Not skill. Connection. Then Keanu turned to the director. "Let Darren try something." The director hesitated. "What do you mean?" "Let him do the scene," Keanu said. Just once. The entire crew turned. Darren, who had been standing in the shadows with his clipboard, looked surprised. "Me?" he said. "You," Keanu replied. "Don't act it. Just be it." After a moment, the director nodded. "All right. Cameras rolling. Action." Darren stepped forward. The scene was simple. A soldier returning from a failed mission holding the tags of his fallen friend. No special effects, no explosions, just words. But when Darren spoke, the whole room changed. "He said he'd be back by dawn," Darren whispered, eyes locked on the empty cot in front of him. "He said the sunrise always made him feel like things could start over, but the sun came and he didn't." His voice broke, but he didn't stop. "I told him to stay, I told him the road wasn't safe, but he smiled, that stupid, fearless smile, and said, 'I'll be fine, Sarge.'" Keanu watched closely. This wasn't a performance. This was truth. Raw and aching, Darren took a shaky breath. He left his favorite book behind. Said I should read it if he didn't make it back. I never opened it. Not until today. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small real book, the same one he had shown Keanu days before. The cover was faded. Pages worn. "Page 72, he said, flipping it open with trembling fingers. He marked it. He read aloud. "We do not fear death because we have lived with honor, but we fear being forgotten because without memory, we vanish twice." Silence. Even the lights buzzed quieter. The director said nothing. The cameras kept rolling. Finally, Darren looked up, tears in his eyes. "He's not gone. Because I remember." He held the tags to his chest and whispered, "I'll carry you, brother, always." Then he turned and walked off frame. "Cut," the director said, voice trembling. "Cut. My God." No one moved. A few crew members had tears on their faces. Even the sound guy lowered his headphones slowly like he was afraid to break. The moment the director approached Darren. "I've been in this business for 20 years. I've seen Oscar-winning actors cry on cue, but I've never seen something like that." Darren didn't respond. He just nodded politely. Keanu stepped up beside him. "You okay?" Darren looked at him and whispered, "That wasn't the scene. That was the day he died." Keanu gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You honored him." Later that night, word spread. The crew asked the director to keep the footage. Even the studio head called in, saying the scene needed to be in the final cut. It was too real, too powerful to replace. The next day, something even more surprising happened. An older man arrived on set, unannounced. He wore a long coat and walked with a cane. He waited patiently outside the lot until Keanu noticed him during a break. "Can I help you?" Keanu asked kindly. The man nodded. "I'm Colonel James Norwood, retired. I served with Darren McAllister. Saw the footage last night. Someone sent it to me." Keanu's eyes widened. "How?" "Someone from the editing room," the colonel said. "They thought I should see it. I haven't spoken to Darren in years, not since the funeral." Keanu led him quietly to the side area where Darren was setting up training stances for extras. When Darren looked up and saw him, he froze. The book dropped from his hands. "Colonel," Darren whispered. "You're alive," the colonel said, his voice tight. "But son, you haven't been living." Darren's lip trembled. "That scene," the colonel said. "I watched it 3 times. That wasn't just for a movie. That was your message to him, and maybe to yourself too." Darren blinked rapidly, trying not to cry again. "We're soldiers," the colonel said. "But we're men too. And grief. Grief can be heavier than a full pack. You carried it alone for too long." Then the colonel stepped forward and embraced him. The two men stood there, strong, broken, healing, all at once. And in that moment, it became clear to everyone on set. Some stories weren't just meant to entertain. Some were meant to heal. Keanu watched silently. He didn't need to say anything. He had brought Darren into the light, but Darren was the one who stepped through it. The letter that never got delivered. It had been a week since Darren filmed the unscripted scene, but the impact still rippled through the studio like quiet waves. Something had changed. It wasn't just the footage that people remembered. It was the emotion, the truth, and how a man once seen as just a background consultant had become the soul of the story. The director rewrote parts of the script, not to glorify war, but to show the parts that never made it to the screen, the silent grief, the guilt, the brotherhood. Darren now had a recurring presence in the film, not as a character, but as himself. He didn't speak much on camera, but whenever he appeared, you felt it. The weight, the respect, the memory, and Keanu. Keanu had been watching closely. He saw something building in Darren, something slow and quiet like a storm deep under the sea. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something else, something unfinished. One evening, after wrap, Keanu found Darren, sitting alone again, not on the same bench but near the back fence where the sky turned soft and purple. He was holding something in his lap, a small envelope, yellowed with age, unopened. "Mind if I join you?" Keanu asked. Darren nodded, eyes still locked on the envelope. "What's that?" Keanu asked gently. Darren hesitated. "A letter." Keanu waited. "It's from him," Darren said. "Ben, the friend I lost." Keanu's breath caught slightly. "He sent it before that last mission," Darren said, voice rough. "The one he never came back from. I found it with his things. It was meant for me. I never opened it." "Why?" Darren looked away, his throat tight. "Because I wasn't ready. Because maybe I was afraid of what it might say. Maybe I thought I didn't deserve to hear his last words." Keanu leaned forward. "You don't have to read it, but if you do, you won't be alone." Darren looked at him, the envelope trembling slightly in his hands. "You sure?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." Darren took a deep breath. Then slowly, carefully, he opened the flap. The paper inside was small, folded neatly. His hands shook as he unfolded it. The handwriting was familiar, strong, steady, the way Ben used to write his mission reports. Darren read aloud. "Dear Darren, if you're reading this, I guess I didn't make it back. Don't get all mopey, all right? You always carried too much on your shoulders. Let me say this once and for all. None of this is your fault. I volunteered. I believed in what we were doing, and if it was my time, then so be it. But don't you dare disappear after this. Don't hide behind the uniform. Don't let guilt become your home. You were meant to lead, not grieve forever. You were meant to teach, to love, to live. Promise me, brother. You'll do that. Don't carry me like a burden. Carry me like a badge. I'll be with you in every sunrise. Until then, Ben." The words fell heavy and soft like rain on dry ground. Keanu said nothing. He didn't need to. Darren sat frozen, staring at the paper like it held the last piece of his soul. And maybe in some way it did. His lips trembled. He whispered, I knew. Even back then, he knew I'd carry it." Keanu leaned back, eyes wet. "And now, maybe it's time to carry it differently." Darren folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. But this time, he didn't hide it. He placed it in the front pocket of his shirt, close to his heart. "I want to start something," Darren said suddenly. "A program, not just for vets, but for actors, directors, writers, anyone trying to tell real stories. A place where we connect real soldiers with storytellers, and not to teach them how to hold a gun, but to teach them how to hold the truth." Keanu's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. We'll call it the Badge Project," Darren said. "Stories carried with honor." "I'll help fund it," Keanu said without hesitation. "We'll get partners, studios, even schools. We'll make it real." Darren smiled, tears rolling down, but not from grief this time. from purpose. For Ben? For Ben, Keanu echoed. The next day, the idea spread like wildfire. People donated. A news outlet heard about it. Then another. Soon, veterans from around the country reached out. Some just to share their story. Others to say, I want to help. The studio offered Darren a full-time role, not just as a consultant, but as a bridge between worlds. He accepted, but only under one condition. The first story they helped develop would be about Ben. Not the war, not the violence, just the boy who loved history books, who dreamed of teaching, who smiled at sunrises. Keanu and Darren worked on the script together night after night. And then, one afternoon, a letter arrived addressed to Darren, handwritten, from a small high school in Idaho. Dear Mr. McAllister, we heard about the badge project. My students watched the video of your scene. They wanted to know more about the man you spoke of. Ben, could you send us a photo of him? We'd like to name our new library after him. Thank you for helping us understand that real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they write letters. Sincerely, Mrs. Anderson's history class. Darren stared at the letter for a long time. Then, from his wallet, he pulled out a worn photo. Ben, sitting on a tank, smiling like he had all the time in the world. He placed the photo on the table beside the letter. His hand rested on it gently. He's not forgotten, Darren whispered. He never will be. And for the first time in years, he felt something lift. Not the memory, not the pain, but the weight of silence. Because now, the world knew Ben's name. When silence stood and clapped, the auditorium was quiet. Almost too quiet. It held hundreds of students, teachers, veterans, and even reporters, but no one moved. Everyone's eyes were on the stage where Darren McAllister stood under a single spotlight, holding that same faded photo of Ben. The badge project had grown faster than anyone expected. What started as a whispered idea on a movie set had turned into a national movement. Keanu Reeves sat in the front row, not as a movie star but as a friend. He'd flown in the night before just to be here, refusing any attention. He wore a simple black shirt, jeans, and that soft, calm expression that never tried to outshine anyone. Today wasn't about him, it was about Darren, and the promise he made on a bench under a jacaranda tree to never let Ben be forgotten. Darren cleared his throat, his voice still low but steady. I used to think I'd never speak about Ben, not to strangers, not in front of crowds. I thought, if I kept him close, he'd never really be gone. But holding pain like that, it doesn't protect anyone. It only buries you too. He looked around the crowd. Students, barely old enough to understand war, leaned forward in their seats. Some clutched notepads, others simply listened, wide-eyed. Ben wanted to be a teacher, Darren continued. He carried history books in his rucksack even during missions. He believed the future could be shaped by the truth of the past. And now, his name is going. On a school library, he's getting the legacy he deserved. A few people sniffled quietly. A history teacher in the back wiped her eyes with a tissue. This isn't about one soldier, Darren said. It's about all of us, about the stories we carry, the pain we hide, and the kindness we still owe each other. Then he paused and said, Stand up if someone in your family ever wore a uniform. A rustle moved through the crowd as people rose from their seats. Keanu stood too, quietly, respectfully. Now, Darren said gently, stand up if someone you love, ever, came back home different, quieter, more distant, maybe even broken. More people rose. Students, parents, even some reporters. You're not alone, Darren said. And neither were they. He stepped back from the microphone. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of grief, memory, and deep gratitude. And then it happened. Someone in the back clapped once, then again. And slowly, the room erupted. Not in wild applause, but in a standing ovation that was quiet and strong. Like thunder heard from the bottom of the ocean, Keanu looked, up eyes glassy. He wasn't clapping with his hands, but with his heart. Afterward, outside the auditorium, people gathered to speak with Darren. Veterans shook his hand. Students handed him letters. A father who had lost his son hugged him tight and whispered, "Thank you for giving us a way to remember them right." A local news anchor tried to push a microphone in Darren's face, but Keanu stepped forward, blocking gently. "Not today," Keanu said with a calm firmness. "Today's not for cameras. Today's for the soul." They left quietly after the crowd thinned. Just the two of them, walking side by side through the school courtyard as the sun dipped low, painting the bricks with orange and gold. "You didn't have to fly in," Darren said. "I wanted to," Keanu replied. "You stood for him. Today I stood for you." They sat on a bench under a tree, echoing the first time they met. "I've been thinking," Keanu said, watching the sky. "This badge project, it needs more than a message. It needs a home, a place where people can come, share stories, heal." Darren looked at him. "Like a center?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, a real space. Classrooms, recording rooms, maybe even a theater, where veterans teach filmmakers, where students meet soldiers, where silence becomes story." "How would we start?" Darren asked. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I already bought the land. It's near the studio. Big space, peaceful, good light." Darren laughed, in disbelief. "Of course you did. You once told me your friend Ben wanted to teach," Keanu said. "Now he will, through every person who walks through that door." Darren swallowed the lump in his throat. "You think people will come?" "They already are," Keanu said. "You just haven't seen them all yet." And he was right. The center opened 3 months later. It didn't look flashy. The sign out front was simple: the Badge Project Center. Stories that stand tall. But inside, it breathed with life. Photos of soldiers hung on the walls, not in uniforms but in moments. Laughing, writing, dancing, holding newborn babies. Actors sat in circles with veterans, reading lines and learning silence. Students interviewed war heroes, not about battles, but about resilience, faith, and hope. One room was filled with letters, thousands of them. Some from soldiers, some from families, some from strangers. All of them telling one simple truth: your story helped me find mine. On the opening night, Keanu and Darren stood quietly in a side hallway. They watched people come in, explore, and slowly feel less alone. "You nervous?" Keanu asked. "Terrified," Darren admitted, "but grateful too." A young girl with braces walked up, holding her mom's hand. She pointed at a photo of Ben and said, "Mom, that's the teacher from the letter." The mother smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, that's him." And Darren, standing just feet away, finally allowed himself to smile too. Not the smile of a soldier, hiding pain, but the smile of a man who found peace, not by forgetting but by remembering in the right way. That night, as they closed the center for the first time, Keanu turned to Darren and said, "You know, this might be the most important role either of us has ever played." "What role is that?" Darren asked. "Just being human," Keanu said, "and helping others do the same." When the past walks in the Badge Project Center had been open for 6 months. What started as a whisper on a quiet bench had grown into a living, breathing sanctuary. The center now hosted weekly storytelling nights, filmmaking workshops, and therapy through art and voice. There were no uniforms required, only open hearts. Keanu Reeves remained deeply involved, though he never made it about himself. He showed up unannounced, sat in the back rows, and helped sweep the floors when the crowds left. He donated silently, but more importantly, he listened. Really listened. And when he spoke, it was with the weight of someone who had carried his own quiet wounds for a long time. Darren McAllister had become a pillar, no longer the trembling man crying alone under a tree. He was now the one people leaned on, but he never let them forget that he once needed someone to lean on too. His scars weren't gone, but he wore them differently now. Not as shame, but as symbols of survival. On a quiet Saturday morning, while organizing letters in the center's memory room, A soft knock echoed at the door. Darren turned and said, "Come in." The door creaked open. A woman stepped in, middle-aged, modestly dressed. Her hands shook slightly. She held something in her arms, a small wooden box. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said. "Not at all," Darren replied. "Please, have a seat." She sat down slowly and placed the box on the table. "My name is Margaret. Margaret Evans. I was Ben's sister." Darren froze. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I saw you on the news, the story, the letter, the center. And I had to come." Darren's voice cracked. "He talked about you all the time. You were going to move to the coast. He said he wanted to help pay for your art school." Margaret nodded, eyes glistening. "He did. And because of his benefits, I actually went. I never got to thank him. And I never got to thank you." Darren swallowed hard, trying to hold steady. "You don't need to." "Yes, I do," she said firmly. "You carried him. You spoke his name when the world forgot. You built all this so people would remember more than uniforms. You gave me my brother back." She opened the wooden box. Inside was Ben's dog tag, a worn photograph, and a small leather journal. "He wrote this during his last deployment," she said. "I found it in my attic years ago, never opened it. I couldn't. But maybe you should have it." Darren reached out and touched the journal like it was something holy. He opened to a random page. The handwriting was instantly familiar. October 7th. "Darren's still beating me at chess, 2 months straight. I think he's letting me win just to mess with my head. But he's more than just a friend. He's my brother. If anything happens to me, I hope he knows that." Darren closed the journal and pressed it to his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. Margaret looked around the room, at the framed letters on the wall, at the photos, the names etched into the wood. This is what healing looks like. Keanu walked in quietly just then. He had heard voices but stayed back, not wanting to interrupt. When he saw Margaret, he paused. She stood and nodded to him. "You're part of this story too," she said, to Keanu. "And thank you for seeing him." Keanu gave a gentle smile. It was never about seeing him as a soldier. It was about seeing him as human. That night, a special event was held. It wasn't planned, but word spread fast. People brought candles, flowers, photos, letters. Veterans stood beside children, mothers beside actors, and students beside strangers. A projector was set up outside the center under the open sky, and a short documentary was played, a film titled Ben's Sunrise, written and narrated by Darren himself, produced quietly by Keanu. The final scene showed Darren sitting at Ben's favorite sunrise lookout, reading his letter aloud. No music, just wind, light, memory. When the film ended, the screen faded to black, and one simple line appeared. He lived with honor. He died with purpose. And now, he lives on through us. The crowd stood in silence. Not mourning, honoring, after. Everyone left. Keanu and Darren stood under the stars. The air smelled like candle wax in early autumn. "You changed lives," Keanu said softly. "You gave me the chance to," Darren replied. "So what now?" Keanu asked. Darren looked up, at the sky. "Now we keep going. We find the next person sitting on a bench thinking no one sees them, and we show them they're not invisible." Keanu nodded. "Yeah, one story at a time." They sat in silence for a while. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere inside the center, a nightlight flickered on, casting a soft glow over the photos on the walls. Then Keanu said something that Darren never forgot. "You know, I've made movies for decades. But this is the most real thing I've ever been part of." Darren smiled, not with sadness, but with quiet peace. "Me too." And as they walked side by side into the center to lock up for the night, the final light clicked off behind them. But in the hearts of everyone who'd heard Ben's name, who'd cried during that unscripted scene, who found hope through a story told from pain. Something stayed lit. A flame passed from one soul to another, not in a script, but in life.